who you all are, kind of care that you have towards other people, that you're here and taking this topic seriously. I know this is not an easy thing. I know that this is a very intense thing to talk about, but I think the fact you're all here says to me that you are aware, thank you, that that there is a need in our community to support individuals in different ways, including in times of crisis. So I'm grateful to you all that you're here. Okay, let's get started, and then I'm gonna like give some some stuff. Okay, first things first, I just want to make this clear that this is an information session and not an intensive mental health seminar. We are not using diagnostic tools today. We will talk about how you can get support for yourself or other people, what resources look like, referrals, etc. But if you come out of this workshop tonight and you're like, Leigh from the Long Short Road told me this, and I have this, then I did not do my job right. So just keep in mind, if at any point you need clarification, that's why we're doing this in person, and that's why this is about you and not me. If you have questions, I want to hear them. Okay, where are we headed? And then I'll tell you a little bit about myself and the organization. We're going to talk about understanding suicidal behavior through a lens of understanding health. We'll talk about who potentially could be at high risk. How do we become suicide aware? How can we help, and what is our role? We'll also briefly talk about the idea of a safety plan, which even though if each of you are not clinicians and are not necessarily making a safety plan for an individual, as a supportive friend or family member, parent, whatever, you might be included in someone's safety plan. So it's important for you to know what it is, even if you're not making one with them. We will have a Q&A at the end, but here's what I'm going to say. I don't want you to feel that this is just me talking at you. If you have questions, ask me. If something doesn't sit right with you, I want to know. Because at the end of the day, I have you for an hour and a half, and then you're going to go out into the world. And then with Hashem's help, you never have to use these tools. But realistically, you might have to, right? So if something doesn't make sense, or if it's not sitting well with you, I need to know so that I can work on that clarification so that we all leave feeling, you know, like we have the right foundation. Okay, so who am I and who's the Long Short Road? So I've been working in crisis management for 6.5, almost 7 years. I got started as a layperson. I'm going to make it very clear right now that I'm not yet a licensed mental health professional. I'm a crisis management specialist. I'm not a social worker, not a therapist. Will be one, God willing, soon, but not yet. So 7.5 years ago, 6.5 years ago, 7.5 years ago, I was working in CTEEN as the creative director. And it became very quickly apparent to me that there were issues in mental health that were not being addressed with teens in the communities that I was working with. And I felt very much inclined to do something about it, but I did not know how. I became a crisis management specialist because that was my way of doing it while I was trying to become a licensed mental health professional. So the Long Short Road was born about 4 years ago. The reason why we call it the Long Short Road, does anyone know where the idea of the Long Short Road comes from in Placidus? Tanya, what's the concept in Tanya for the Long Short Road?
Work on something and make it more. It's a long time to get it to be personal.
Right.
At the end of the day, it's your destiny.
Exactly. And that trying to take shortcuts, while it's very attractive to try to take shortcuts, and trust me, I have tried to take shortcuts in my life. I think we all have. It's not realistic, and you're just going to be doing more work trying to undo the shortcuts to get back to the long road to begin with. So mental health, like all health, like anything in life, is a long, short road. There's no shortcuts to being a mentally strong person. It takes diligence. It takes effort. It takes community. There's things, they're they're available to every one of us, but every one of us is going to have our own way to get there. We're all on the path. The path might look different for every person. Okay. You were going to say something? Oh, okay. So let's dive into this. Just a little clarification on what we are and are not doing tonight. The first thing is that suicide prevention is really about fostering hope for right now. It is literally impossible to be responsible for someone's somebody else's well-being for infinity and beyond. It's not possible. What we can do, though, is create a sense and a safety network of support for a person for right now. Right now might be a couple of hours. It might be a couple of weeks. It might be a couple of days. right? It's going to look different for every person. It's also about showing up for people in pain and offering support with empathy and without judgment. What suicide prevention is not, it's not a one-size-fits-all remedy. Every person is going to have their own needs, and every person is going to have their own way of getting there. This is also not something we can do alone. You'll notice this image here of an interconnected web of people, right? We need to have support of others in our journey. You're going to hear me stress this a lot tonight, almost to the point where you're going to get annoyed with me with how many times I'm going to repeat this. You cannot support someone in crisis by yourself. Not safe for you, not safe for them. Not fair to you and not fair to them. If you're the only one who is holding their hand, that one time that you're not available to hold their hand, where else are they going to go? Right? So it's about creating a network of support. On that note, I also want to make it clear. Yeah. Oh yeah. This is just the intro. We'll get there. Right. If you're the only one that knows how do you make that connection, we will talk about that. You cannot forget about yourself. The healthiest way to support other people is to also make sure that you have the support you need. So we are talking about a very intense topic. This can be very triggering and overwhelming. That's normal because this is a difficult thing to discuss. I want you all just in your heads before we go on, can you identify in your mind one person who you can turn to for support? And if you can't, that's okay, because we're going to talk about resources. But the main thing that I want you to think about here is, how can I best support others? It starts with making sure that you also have your own support. Okay. So here's the thing about understanding suicide. Okay. Saying that we understand suicide, it's also important to understand that there's a lot we don't know. There's a lot we don't know about how the mind works. There's a lot we don't understand necessarily about supporting people in crisis. A, and B, understanding does not make the issue less painful. What it can do, though, is give us perspective and humanize people who are struggling so that we can better support them. Okay? So, first things first, suicide is usually a symptom. What do I mean by that? You know, when you have a cold or a flu or you have a virus traveling through your body, you're going to have symptoms that show up that tell you that the virus is there, right? Suicidal behavior and suicidal ideation. Hold on, I'm getting messages from the chat. Oh, I don't know why the screen is flashing. Thank you for telling me. I'm going to try to fix it now. 1 second. Advanced portion of the screen. Okay, people on Zoom, please tell me if, here we go. People on Zoom, please tell me if it's still flashing or if you're good. Good now. Okay, great. So, suicidal behavior, suicidal ideation is usually a symptom of underlying causes. It's very important to make sure that we understand that suicidal ideation or suicidal behavior is not the person's whole identity. It's not who they are. It's not their whole person. It's usually a symptom of underlying causes. So, and that could stem from a lot of things, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But what's important to understand is that for most people, and I'm not saying all, because there's no blanket statements and nothing is 100%, but for most people who are struggling with suicidal ideation, it's a combination of the stressors in their life or the challenges that they're facing, plus a combination of hopelessness. So we all go through challenges, right? Nobody goes through life without facing a challenge. It's not humanly possible to imagine that we get through life without going through one difficulty or another, or many difficulties, right? However, the difference here is that it's that combo of this thing is happening in my life, or these things are happening in my life, and they're happening already for a long time, or maybe a short period of time, plus the combination of I feel hopeless about this getting better, that could lead to suicidal ideation. Now, one thing I really want to stress is that this could happen to anyone. It's not like there's a certain type of person that this happens to, right? This could happen to anyone, because if a person is feeling hopeless about their pain, they're going to look for a way to solve the pain. even if that way of solving it is not rational or logical or safe, our minds are looking for solutions, okay? We're going to talk more about factors in just a minute, but one thing I really want to stress that's important to understand is that suicide and suicidal behavior are not only a symptom of mental illness. A lot of people think, oh, only people who struggle with depression, anxiety, bipolar, BPD, eating disorders. Yes, it is true that a person who is struggling with a mental health condition has an increased risk for suicidal behavior. But again, going through the average, so to speak, challenges of life could prove to be very taxing and challenging on a person to the point where it leads them to look for, a solution, a way out. Does that make sense? It's important to make sure that we understand that it's not one category of people that could potentially be susceptible to this. Okay. There we go. Okay. So there's many components to health that make us who we are, right? When we talk about mental health, when I say the phrase mental health, what do you guys think of? Like, what do you identify as mental health? Anyone? Don't all shout out at once. What's mental health?
Emotional health.
Emotional health. What is it? What does that mean? What does it mean to be emotionally healthy? Self-care, connection with yourself. Okay, but self-care awareness of what?
Of yourself, how you're feeling, everything.
Okay.
Well, self-care comes into that, and you're
right.
Weird.
But self-care looks different for every person, right?
Yeah. I'm thinking of self-care as preventative.
Like preemptive care. Right. Like doing things for yourself before the burnout happens, not waiting until you're in crisis to take care of yourself. Right. So those are all good points. But one thing I want to stress here is that usually when we think of mental health, we kind of disconnect it from all other areas of our lives, right? Like because our brains are up here and we can't see them, it's like, oh, okay, so there's this thing happening inside my head and like all the other aspects of my life are separate from it. Everything about us is interconnected. You cannot separate the parts of yourself the same way that you can't separate your heart and your lungs. Do they do different things? Yes. Do you need them to function together? Yes. So I just want to touch on these 8 dimensions of health because they all play a role in supporting our mental health, and they also all play a role in keeping us safe in times of challenge. So the first is emotional health. The way I describe it, I'm just going to read it from the screen because I don't have these definitions memorized, even though I've given this workshop so many times that I really should. But emotional is the relationship that you have to your inner world and how your inner world allows you to interact with others. The way you see yourself and the perspective that you have of yourself is going to shape the way that you interact with other people, right? Another way to think about emotional or mental health is, am I rigid or flexible in the way that I feel? If I have a perspective about something and I believe it's true, it's going to shape the way I relate, right? If I have a perspective of someone else, they're this way, they're that way. If I'm rigid in that perspective, then I'm going to treat them the way that I think they are, right? Not always, though, are we looking at people through who they are, very rarely. We're actually looking at the world through our perspective. Our world is colored through what we see, right? And how we feel. If you're feeling good up here, right, it's going to change. And I think we all know what that feels like to be like in a rough spot. And we see the world is colored very differently when we are struggling, right? Physical health. Physical health is treating our bodies with the kindness that it deserves. So that means doing all the basics, right? Like exercising, getting enough sleep, drinking enough water, eating healthy food. But it's also the relationship that we have to our body. How do we feel about our body? Are we kind to our bodies? Are you shaming yourself for how you feel or how you look? Or are you kind to yourself, right? Social health is a huge one. I'll share with you let me give you the definition and then I'll share with you a story that I heard recently. Social is making space for healthy relationships and also for making space for a healthy relationship with ourselves. Most of us are not comfortable or don't even know what it feels like to have a relationship with ourselves. Do I know myself inside? Am I comfortable being alone, or do I need other people or distractions around me at all times? So I'll tell you an interesting statistic, an interesting story that I just learned about social health. recent studies on wait 1 minute. Okay, do I have my voice back? No. Okay, I'm good now. Recent studies on social health have shown that the number one predictor of longevity and long-term health in human beings is social connection. So here's a crazy statistic for you, okay? You take two people and you put one who's a heavy smoker, smokes 17 cigarettes a day, into a robust, healthy social group. They have close friends, they have connections, they have people they feel they can turn to. And you take a person who does not smoke, who has no social connection, is socially isolated and feels disconnected from community. Doing a long study of those two people, the person who is more likely to develop heart disease, diabetes, and cancer is the person who is socially isolated. Like, whoa, right? This speaks to the volume of how much we need other people. We are not meant to exist in a vacuum, right? Okay, the next is, yes.
People could be social and still feel isolated.
Sure. So that's a very good point. It's not only about being with other people, because if you're being with other people and you're still feeling lonely, part of it might be, are you using other people to try to fill a void that can only really be filled by having a healthy relationship with yourself, right? Like, I remember being in my early 20s and being around people all the time and always being miserable and always feeling lonely and being like, well, what's the issue? I'm with people all the time. And the point that I was able to realize with a lot of work was like, well, I literally am with people from the minute I get up until I go to sleep. And if I'm alone for 5 minutes, I'm so uncomfortable, I feel like I'm jumping out of my own skin. A big proponent of being able to find so healthy, not just social relationships, healthy social relationships that work for you is also knowing what you need, right? Are these good friends? Are they healthy for me? Am I feeling safe with them? Or am I surrounded by them and do I feel very lonely? Because that's probably going to contribute to the same factors as the person who has no one, right? Okay, occupational health. So what do you do for a living? Your job. If you're a student, if you're an employee, if you're an employer, if your occupation is to take care of your family. So there's two things here is, do I feel that my occupation, whatever it is, that I am contributing, that it is contributing to my well-being, meaning I'm gaining something from it, and that I'm able to give back in a meaningful way, right? So like, for those of you who are students, the way that I would look at this is like, do I feel that my education is positively impacting my contribution to the world, or am I just trying to like get through my classes to get an easy A and move on, right? Am I happy at my job, or am I just clocking the hours until I can get a paycheck and I just, right? Like I just need to get past it. Okay, the next is financial. So financial does not mean that you have to be a millionaire in order to be happy, but people who are living below the poverty line have a very different mentality about survival than people who are not, right? If you are just trying to make ends meet and get through the week and make sure you can put food on the table, your well-being is going to be very much dependent on that, right? The next is environmental. The home you live with, the people you're surrounded by. We don't realize how much our home life shapes us, right? Am I comfortable at home? Can I express myself? Is it a safe place for me? Do I feel like if I say something the wrong way, my roommates are going to snap at me, or I don't feel safe talking to my parents, etc. Now, spiritual, this is a big one, and I just want to pause here for 1 minute to explain something. The fact that spiritual is up here is actually a huge deal for the developments that modern psychology has made, that Hasidus has been doing for hundreds of years. When modern psychology was developed, the creators of modern psychology, who were all Jewish men, made a very distinct separation between psychology and spirituality. And they believed that there was no room for a spiritual practice or spiritual life in psychology. What we know, which I think we have known for generations and generations as Torah observant Jews, but also what we know through the research, which is really, it's really interesting to note that like there's so much research now on the power of spirituality, because it's like, well, could have told you that like 100 years ago, but okay, is that spirituality is not only about a religious practice, okay? Because for many people, they don't identify with spirituality as a religious practice. It's recognizing the power of something greater than you in the world, realizing that you're one piece in the puzzle. You're not the whole puzzle, and that you can contribute meaningfully to the puzzle, but you're not the whole puzzle. And that actually takes a lot of pressure off if you think about it. There's more to life than me. There's more to life than what's in this container, right? It's outside of me. Not everything is in my control, and I can turn to a higher power. Yes, that also includes religious practice. Davening, learning, being in a frum environment definitely contributes to our spirituality, but not for everybody, right? So we have to keep in mind that spirituality could also just mean our relationship to Hashem, our personal life. Because at the end of the day, that's all it comes down to. Your personal relationship with Hashem is that's all you're taking with you when you get to Shemayim, right? Last one is intellectual. So intellectual is having a desire and a motivation to learn, to grow, to change. Now, what do all these things have to do with mental health issues or mental health crisis? Think about how you feel when you are physically sick and how hard it is to focus on any of these things besides for getting physically better, right? When a person is struggling, there are many parts and components to a person that contribute to their struggle. It's not just like one thing happens, A, B, C. It's not that linear. People are a lot more, we're nuanced as human beings, right? All of these dimensions have the ability to contribute to our well-being and also to diminish our well-being, right? And I'm actually going to move to the next slide so I can show you what I mean. Oop, there we go. All of us in our lives have things that protect us and also potentially put us at risk. So like, I'll just give you an example from my personal life because I feel like this is the easiest way to describe it. My daughter was born January 1st of 2020. And I was already struggling with postpartum depression, and then COVID started. And then I got it. So I was really sick with COVID with a newborn and really depressed. Not a good place to be. I'm not going to lie. It was not fun. I had certain protective factors in my life, right? A supportive partner, a great medical team, all that stuff. I also had risks in my life. History of depression, history of anxiety, right? What we hope is that having protective factors in our life acts as tools, as buffers for support. I really want to make this clear, and you're going to hear me say this a few more times. Having a protective factor in your life does not erase risk, because the fact that we are human means that we will be at risk for certain things, right? This is the human condition. What's true, though, is that protective factors are supposed to act in ways that they kind of soften and protect us when we're struggling, right? So not that they erase the challenges, because that's not a realistic expectation to have, but that they create a sense of support. And so when we think about these dimensions, if a person is struggling in certain areas of their lives, you might think like, uh-oh, that's really bad. But what might exist as a risk in one area, in their emotional, physical, or social health, for example, they could have buffers of support in other areas. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Okay. This list of risk factors is super, super general. We can go into more detail if you guys are interested, but I wanted to keep it pretty surface level. The things that we look at when we look at who is at risk for suicide, and I also want to make it clear, suicidal ideation, suicidal behavior could happen to anyone. The fact that these risks exist does not mean that if a person doesn't have these risks in their lives means that they will not struggle. But when we look at historically, statistically, where are people struggling the most, this is what we see. Genetic vulnerability, stressful life events, that could be good events, and that could be bad events, and that could also be positive events. Can anyone think of like a couple of positive life events that are really stressful?
Planning a wedding.
Having a baby. Getting married. New job. Moving. You know what's one that people don't think about? Winning the lottery, graduating. Historically, there is proof that shows that the risk goes up for suicidal behavior for people who won the lottery. Why? You would think that's like the best thing that ever happened to a person. Such a dramatic life change comes with a lot of consequences, right? Including the positive things. A history of abuse, bullying, or neglect. And that doesn't mean it has to be prolonged, right? It doesn't mean that a person has to have been abused for years and years or bullied for years and years. It could be a handful of incidents or one incident, right? A sudden or large life change, again, positive or negative. The existence or development of a mental illness. Transitional life stages. So you said graduating, getting married, having a baby, moving away from home, becoming an empty nester, all of your kids moving out of the house. Substance use or dependence. One thing I want to say on this is that not everyone who's using drugs or alcohol as a coping mechanism is at risk for suicide, meaning they're not all walking around suicidal. What we do know, though, is that if a person is abusing alcohol or drugs, it inhibits your brain's reaction to risk. So when you are under the influence of drugs or alcohol, you are more likely to engage in risky behavior because it just diminishes your risk, your risk fear. And so you're more likely to engage in things that could be dangerous or harmful. A couple of additional factors to keep in mind, okay? Our world today is a very interesting world. We are seeing a much higher increase in loneliness, a lack of meaning or purpose. Who am I? What's my purpose? What do I matter? What am I doing with my life? Busy is a badge of honor. Most of us are so busy all the time that we don't really have time to be quiet within our own selves and get to know ourselves, right? We're kind of on that hamster wheel of like, I have to produce all the time to prove my worth, right? We also live on autopilot. Do you know how sometimes you get to shop? I don't know if anyone ever has this experience, or is it just me? I get to Shabbos, and for the first hour, I'm like, it feels like something is missing from my body because my phone is not in my hand. And it's like, oh yeah, I can slow down now. I don't have to be checking my email even when it's not Shabbos, I don't have to be checking my email 800 times a day. But for some reason, I feel like I have to, right? We are so in go, go, go mode that our minds don't necessarily have time to like settle and come just to like homeostasis, right? This is a big one. Does not matter how old you are, does not matter where you are in your life. Social media is lying to us. Everybody who is posting that 5 seconds of bliss is not showing you the 800 hours of discomfort that they are going through to get those 5 seconds of bliss. I cannot tell you how many times I will get a picture with my family and I have to think twice. Do I actually want to post this? Because I know that 2 seconds ago, I was yelling at my daughter to sit down and I was barking at my husband on something, but I'm going to post this picture and everyone's thinking, wow, Leigh has a perfect family. Social media is not telling us the whole truth. But when we are struggling, like case in point, when I was going through the worst parts of my postpartum depression and I was seeing pictures of happy families on Instagram, it did not make me feel any better. It made me feel like there was something wrong with me, right? And how many people who are in shidduchim see couples getting engaged? You see those pictures at the aisle, and you're like, it's everybody else but me, right? We don't actually know the truth of what's going on in people's lives just from social media, right? The other thing, though, is also this feeling of our brains being high on dopamine. What does that mean? Can anyone give me a thought on what they think I'm talking about?
Social media.
Besides for social media. When we receive something, when our brain receives something that feels good, it gives it like a little hit of dopamine, right? And dopamine is supposed to make us feel good, so we want more of it. It's not only social media. It's the fact that today you can buy everything online without ever leaving your couch. You could be in 600 countries without ever leaving your couch. You could talk to your friends, FaceTime your mom, do all the things, and all you're doing is being connected to your phone, right? It's not just social media. It's all of the availability that the interconnectedness has given us. But it's a lot harder to come back to just being happy with what you have when your brain is so used to receiving, right? The last thing is, as I mentioned before, the reliance on drugs, alcohol, and prescriptions. There are things that are needed in order for us to feel safe. Sometimes prescriptions are necessary. And also, sometimes they contribute to the problem. Okay. All right, protective factors. I said this before, I'm going to say it again. Protective factors do not eliminate your challenges, they soften them. And protective factors are also going to vary and change depending on where you are in your life, what stage you're in, where you are, how much free time you have, etc. But the example of a person riding a bike, if you get on a bike, right, you put on your helmet, do you expect that the helmet's going to stop you from falling off the bike? No. If that's the expectation that you have of the helmet, don't get on the bike. Seriously, save yourself the heartache. Don't get on the bike. The helmet is going to protect you if you fall. It's not going to stop you from falling. And neither will protective factors, right? Because life is an ebb and flow. You will have moments where you're doing really well and moments where you're neutral and moments where you're not as well. And it will go in a, we think life goes like this in a linear, it actually goes like this, right? So protective factors could include things like having the support of a mental health professional, having a sense of community and social connections, having a spiritual practice, having all the basics, exercise, a healthy diet, sleep, and staying hydrated, breathing techniques, meditation, yoga, whatever you want to throw in there. But they're also going to change over time. And they're also going to change depending on the level of crisis, right? If a person is having a panic attack, that's probably not the time to tell them, breathe. Well, if they can't catch their breath, then trying to breathe is probably going to be counterintuitive, right? The other thing that's really important about protective factors, and this is true for all of us, not only for those of us who are trying to support who are in crisis, it's really important not to wait until there's a crisis happening to take care of yourself, right? Like you were saying before, that self-care should be preemptive. It shouldn't be something that we only start practicing when we're struggling, right? It's something that we start practicing now, today, in this moment. Okay, supporting and protecting a suicidal individual. Anyone have any questions or thoughts before we move into the section? Mm-hmm.
How come when it's needed, or when I am doing well in so many of those areas, sometimes I feel like I'm working it feels like I'm working so hard.
Sometimes it does feel like it's a lot of hard work.
It doesn't, like I end up with the self-care and the exercise and the job and all these positive things and, working hard on so many different areas. And it's like,
I feel exhausted.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a very good point. Part of it is also knowing your limits. Like, let me give you an example. Okay, let me ask you, when you exercise, is it like hardcore, I have to go for 60 minutes or nothing? Okay, so what is it?
So 3 times a week I do 30 minutes.
Great.
And then most other days I do 10.
Great. If you find that those mornings that you wake up and 30 minutes feels like too much, take it down to 20 or take it down to 15. Sometimes the problem becomes that we expect that we're going to be the same all the time. And so that the things that we're doing have to be the same all the time. Right. So like, that's why I say okay, here's a good example. I run, not in the winter when it's snowing. That doesn't mean that I stop taking care of myself. I find another way. I think a lot of the burnout that we get from like, I'm doing so great, but why am I so stressed? Is the not meeting ourselves where we are and the giving permission to like, today I could loosen up a little bit in this. I can give 15, there's only 100% you can give of yourself, right? So I can give 0.5% to my job today, right? I can give 3% to my social life today. And maybe that 3% to my social life means spending time with myself alone, no distractions, no phone, writing, journaling, coloring, doing something for me that doesn't feel like I'm trying to produce and check off a box. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
It makes sense, like
intellectually, you gotta, right, but like you gotta drop in on it. I think it really is a matter of like getting to know what your personal abilities are.
Right. So that's where probably is figuring out.
What is it that I actually have the capacity for in a day? And it's okay if that changes, right? Like, I remember there was a point in my life where I hardcore 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, was in the gym, Zumba from 8:30 to 9:30, yoga from 9:30 to 10:30, Don't speak to me for the first 2 hours in the morning. And it got to a point where that wasn't sustainable for me. But I started to think like, I must be falling off the wagon again if I can't do that. And it had to be like, well, actually, no, I'm not, because my needs are changing. And so right now what I need is this. And maybe I'll come back to this next week, or maybe I won't. And it's okay. It doesn't mean that I'm falling off, right? It's just knowing your personal needs and knowing like what works for me right now might not work for me tomorrow. And that's okay.
Is there a way to know? Because there are so many different aspects and so many different.
Yes, go ahead, add to that.
I think that's where you mentioned earlier that in the social aspect that you need to have a good relationship with yourself. So I think that's where it is. Like
that's where you know. That's how you know.
Right. When you work on a good self relationship, you'll be able to
see, because like
that and see the different needs and the changes.
It's so funny because sometimes people will tell me like, well, what's the answer? And I'm like, I don't know what the answer is for you. I know what the answer is for me, because I'm not living in your head. I'm not living your reality. I'm living my reality. So it is a matter of like getting to know yourself and figuring out like, what is it that I actually need versus want? Because those are two different things. What is it that I actually need? And what's the most sustainable way to help me get there? Right? And sometimes it is a matter of pushing yourself, right? Sometimes it's like, I am going to push myself to get out of bed that half hour early today so I could work out. And sometimes it's like, no, I'm going to give myself that slack. The other thing that I want to point out, which I don't want to get into this too much right now, but we could talk about it a little bit later, is that the thing that's fascinating about us as women is that we operate on a cyclical calendar. Men can just operate at baseline the same way all the time. Women fluctuate. There are 4 different phases that a woman goes through every single month, right? Like think about, for example, how much energy you have in the 2 weeks after your period versus when you're on your period, right? You're 2 different people. You cannot expect you can't expect yourself to be the same person in those 2 weeks, right? Anyone who's ever been pregnant knows, like, you do not operate in those 9 months the same way that you do when you're not, right? So just realizing there's a cyclical nature to the way that women operate. And like, I have to get to know that cyclical nature of my life so that I could best fit my needs into the normal rhythm of my body. Make sense? We can talk about this more later. Okay, knowing your role, super crucial. I cannot stress this enough. It is not your job to fix or save someone who is struggling. What do I mean by that? I don't mean that you can't support them. I don't mean that you can't love them and give them the attention that they need and the care that they deserve, and helping them recognize that they are a child of Hashem, regardless of the pain that they are in, they matter. But you can't do the work for them, right? A lot of us, including myself, come to this with like, I'm going to fix the situation. You actually can't. I wish there was a way to, because then I would not be up here talking to you all. I really, I'm saying that genuinely. Being a mental health lifeguard. Has anyone ever lifeguarded? Anyone here has been a lifeguard?
All day,
What? But what's the role of a lifeguard? What's their job? To watch and protect and perform CPR if necessary and pull the person out of the water. Now, what if a lifeguard is sitting on the edge of a pool and they see someone drowning and they go in and they get the person out and they do CPR, but the person needs more help? Does the lifeguard also become the EMT and the doctor? No. Why not? Because it's not their job, right? And it's not fair to expect them, or realistic to expect that that's what they're going to become. And it's the same thing for all of us in supporting people. And by the way, that's true for mental health professionals, that's true for doctors, that's true for everybody. We can support a person up to a certain point, but then sometimes we have to pass them on to the next step, right? So that's
funny. I'm thinking that as you're saying it, it's so much simpler to just pick a person, just figure out into like, it's much simpler. It's like anyone who's trained in EMT or whatever should know what he's doing.
Right.
There aren't like, it's much more complex. It's not just like, okay, call any random person.
What with this?
Yeah.
No, for sure. For sure.
That's why it's so much harder.
But like, we can all learn. The point I'm trying to make though is we can all learn how to do CPR on the neshama. Meaning you have maybe 1 hour with this person, 2 hours with this person, 20 minutes with this person. There are steps that you can take, which we're going to talk about now, steps that you can take to help them get to the next point of safety, right? The same way that when a lifeguard does CPR on someone, if he sees that it's necessary to call 911, he's going to call 911. He's not going to be like, okay, now I'm going to drive you to the hospital and become the registered physician. No, right? It's not fair to expect that of one person. So it's the same thing with us. We can perform, so to speak, soul CPR, but then we also have to know when is it time to get other people involved. Now, I just want to talk on this topic super briefly so that we get through to the 4 steps. It's really important to understand that a distressed mind sees the world differently than a calm mind. We all know what this feels like. You do not have to be at risk for suicide to know that when you are struggling or when you are stressed or overwhelmed, you see the world differently than when you're not. Okay? So a distressed mind, and I'm going to show you an example with your hand, the hand model of the brain in just a minute. A distressed mind is almost like having binoculars glued to your face. You have a very specific perspective of something. Does not matter how many people try to help you have that different perspective. You just don't see it the way they see it. Not because there's something wrong with you and not because you're broken, right? Let me give you this hand model. Okay, so everybody pick up your hand. We're going to do this right now together. Right here, base of your hand where your hand meets your palm. This represents your brainstem. Okay, brainstem and thumb over the thing. This is your amygdala and your limbic system. So these are what they call the reptilian part of the brain, right? So the part of your brain that's responsible for fight or flight, that's responsible for digestion, that's responsible for urinary and bowel movements. This is the area of your brain that does all of that, okay? This is a pretty reptilian part of your brain. This is the part of your brain that helps you get into survival mode. You know, the idea of fight or flight? This is the part of your brain that helps you go into fight or flight, okay? Now, if you fold your fingers over, now you have the prefrontal cortex. So this is up here, okay? This part of the brain, and I'm actually, before I show you the rest of the model, these are the things that your prefrontal cortex is responsible for. Regulating your body, communicating efficiently and effectively, extinguishing fears, being flexible, having insight, self-awareness, and self-knowledge, having empathy for yourself and others, morality, and intuition. Okay, so that's all up here. Now, when a person is in distress, when a person is overwhelmed, what tends to happen, just from a biochemical perspective, yes, Yosef. No, he's agreeing with me and I love it. He's like, I'm here, I get it. What happens is our limbic systems, our prefrontal cortex tend to go offline, and so to speak, we flip our lid. When you feel in fear, when you're in danger, when you feel overwhelmed, when you feel attacked, this part of your brain shuts down, and this part of your brain takes over because it's trying to put you in survival mode. Okay? Why is this so important to understand? Well, last thing I'm going to say on this, I'm not going to stand up because then people on Zoom won't be able to see me. But at the base of your spine, so like right where your spine meets like your neck, right? You have a nerve here called the vagus nerve. It's called the wandering nerve. This is the cranial nerve that connects your brain processing to every area of your body. And you will notice that it's yellow, right? The vagus nerve literally has its hand in every single part of your body. So when your brain goes offline, very often your body will also dysregulate and go offline. Why is this so important to understand? And why am I putting a science lesson in the middle of this? Because when a person is dysregulated for long enough, they will start to seek solutions that do not seem logical and do not make sense. This is where we get tunnel vision. This feeling of there's no way out for me. I feel hopeless. I need to find a way out. So very often we'll hear people who are in crisis struggle to remember that there was a past in which there were positive things happening, or imagine a future in which things could get better. It becomes difficult or impossible to see beyond the pain. They struggle to think that this will ever end. They don't really want their lives to end, but they don't see another solution. Now, tunnel vision brain, this feeling of being like disconnected on a biochemical level, could last hours, it could last days, it could last months. Why is this so important for us to understand, though? Because trying to get through to a person logically, just through rational thinking, is not going to work. We have to get through to them on a body, soul level, in as much talking as connecting physically. And I'll explain what I mean by that in a minute. I love this quote, so I just wanted to share it with you all. Suicide is not no to living, rather it's no to living like this. Okay? So how can we actually help? What's our job here? And how do we actually support someone who's in crisis? So the first is, yes. Yeah.
Can you explain what the vagus nerve had that was connected to the
Okay, so how's that connected to your brain flipping its lid?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I will explain. So when you flip your lid and you go into survival mode, ever notice when you're really stressed out, you can't eat or it's hard to sleep? It's because this part of your brain, which is supposed to help you regulate all of those things, is not able to do that. When you go into survival mode, you're sending a message to your body, literally, that it needs to shut down certain processes in order to survive. It's a biochemical response. So you have two nervous systems that work in tangent, your parasympathetic and your sympathetic, right? Your sympathetic nervous system is the one that's responsible for kind of taking over it takes over when you're in crisis. So it's going to shut down your digestion, bodily functions, all of the like basic drives for survival. It shuts down so that you can focus on just getting out, right? And if you're not able to get out, there's actually 4 responses, right? There's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. You either fawn, you play dead. Like you literally just shut down and go numb. And we see that with a lot of people. If they're in a situation for a long time where they're not able to get out of something, if a person is, God forbid, experiencing abuse in their home, right? And it's not necessarily, there's no safe way for them to get out, they'll kind of shut in and just play nice as a way of surviving. So there's fight, I'm going to fight this. Flight, I'm going to run away from it. Freeze, I'm going to get stuck. Or fawn, I'm just going to go with what's happening so that I can do my best to survive. So the thing about the vagus nerve, which is really important to understand, is that the vagus nerve can be kind of like recalibrated, and you can get your brain back online by doing things like breathing or like safe, healthy touch, right? Which is why I was saying that you can't just get to the logic of a person, because if they're not online, they're not going to see it that way, right? But if you can bring them kind of back to their awareness, yes, through talking, but also like, let's take a breath together. Let's, can I give you a hug? Can I hold your hand? Just helping them get back in touch. Because if your brain is offline, your body is also going to be offline. If you want to bring a person back into their brain, you have to start with the body. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. Sure.
Next question.
Absolutely.
Before, like, if someone's in a panic attack, you have to tell them to start breathing. Where yes and where no?
So I think it's important every single situation is different, but I think it has to start in a small way. If a person's having a panic attack and they're not able to breathe, having them hold their hands to their chest just to make a connection between them and their body can be very helpful. Hugging them if they want to.
Just feel like I'm like alive.
I'm alive, I'm here, right? Because like a panic attack, when they're big, they often feel like a heart attack. So it depends on the situation. I always say it's best to ask the person what they feel they need. What would be most helpful? How can I be most helpful to you right now? They all right. They might not know, and sometimes that question makes it worse.
It's a guessing game.
Right. So you could be like, can we try this together? Right?
My biggest challenge is when they're not responsive and like you don't want to touch them if they don't want it, but you're not really getting.
So the best thing that you can do
is a real big SMU.
Is to be there. Is to be there and not try to. I know that sounds really counterintuitive. I know it's the hardest thing is to sit with someone in pain and not know what to do, and they're not being responsive because they can't be.
Right.
Is to just sit with them. I'm here for you. However, it's going to take 20 minutes. Okay. And not trying to rush them through. Okay. Are you better now? Can we like deal with this now? No, sometimes it takes, we run a referral service for the long short road. So people will call me when they have someone in crisis, just not as a hotline. We don't do hotline, but like referring people to next step for care. And sometimes, especially when it's the person themselves who's in crisis, having them try to explain what's happening is very taxing on them, especially if they've already told the story 800 times. Right? If they're coming to me and they've already explained to 6 therapists what they're going, I had a girl once tell me, I'm too tired to talk about it, but I have a PowerPoint I could send you. And I was like, good on you that you recognize your capacity for not being able to keep talking, because it was re-traumatizing. Every time she spoke about it, she's like, I can't talk about this anymore. Right? My point being, oh my God, I lost my train of thought.
Just being with the person.
Just being with the person, right? If that's what it takes. Oh, so sometimes when families call me and I ask them, I'm like, what's going on? Or how are you? Or how can I help? They don't know how to answer that question. It might take them 15 minutes to figure out how to articulate it, right? So they'll kind of go in a circle before they get to their point. My job is not to be like, hello, get to the point. My job is to be like, okay, take your time. I know this might be challenging for you. Take all the time you need. And to make them know, to help them know that it's safe for them to kind of relax into taking their time and not have to put on a production to get to their point. You know what I mean? There have been times where I'm like, sobbing, like heaving from how hard I'm crying. And the person next to me is like, okay, so how can I help you? It's like, I don't know. Just hold me and wait for me to stop crying. Right? Most times what is needed of us is very little in terms of what we can actually do, so much as it's just showing up. Right? Let's get into that, because that's really my point. Yes.
On the other hand,
No, go ahead. And then I'll take your question.
On the other hand, that's in the more like intense situation. On like a lower scale, so just like super anxious about something, it's not a full-blown panic attack.
Right.
Minor than it does help, right?
Yeah.
That's what I've seen.
And sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes when people have told me, let's take a deep breath together, I'm like, you can leave now. I don't want to talk to you. Get out of my face.
Well,
right?
You usually ask them.
Right. You ask them, would it be helpful? I've never done that. Another thing about anxiety, though, if a person is just experiencing like a bout of anxiety about something, is not to try to fix it. Right? Like I had a mom call me once. She's like, my daughter gets anxious about the most basic things. I don't understand. Why is she so anxious about when this thing is coming in the mail? And it's like, well, anxiety is usually coming from a fear of what we can't control. And so it's not about the shoes. It's not about the textbook. There's something, right? There's something else. Just validating. I'm sorry that you're feeling so anxious about this. Not, why are you feeling so anxious about this? You hear the difference in the way that sounds, right? I'm sorry that you're feeling this way. That's heavy. That's hard. Just validate. It doesn't mean you're like giving them a what's it called? Like a get out of jail free card, right? But you're helping them feel a little bit safer in their feelings. So, yes.
Can you, the slide with the emotions like this? I just can't read it here. I just want to take a quick picture of that.
Yeah, sure.
Very...
Yeah. No, it is very small there. And you can also Google this. Dr. Daniel Siegel is the one who came up with this. He has an explanation on there's a YouTube video, like 3 minutes long, where he does an intensive on it, really goes in depth on this, and it's very cool.
Dr. Daniel
Siegel.
Or it's just.
I think it's just good to understand that when our brains go offline, for anyone, you don't have to be in suicide crisis to know when your brain is not online. It's not because there's something wrong with you. It's not because you're a broken person. it's because your brain is doing its job to try to protect you. And that before you can get to problem solving, you have to get back into your body. You know? Okay, so what are the tools that we're using here? Awareness, knowing what to look for, communication, asking and listening, and connecting. So let's go through this. We have like a half hour left. So I'm gonna try to make this as succinct as possible. Please show up slide. There we go. Okay. Individuals who are in crisis are usually going to show or tell us that they're struggling, but not directly. Very rarely is a person going to say, help, I'm having thoughts of killing myself. Please help me not do that. Very rare. Why? Anyone have any guesses? Shame. They might not be aware of how intense it is, or even if they're having the thoughts, they're scared to verbalize it because they're worried that maybe that will like make it come true. The fear of like, what will people think of me? Or like, what will the consequences be of asking for help? Am I going to lose my job? Is my spouse going to leave me? Am I going to have an impossible time with shidduchim now? I had a young girl that I'm working with say to me today, I don't want to tell people I'm struggling because they're going to stop being my friends if I tell them. They will not be able to handle this and I will lose all my friends. Better to have friends who are not real friends than to be alone. Verbatim, word for word, came out of the mouth of someone I spoke to 4 hours ago. 5 hours ago.
But also talk about how everything affects. I've seen it also where like struggling in so many areas that it affected everything.
100%.
Friends eventually did leave.
For sure.
Like
absolutely.
And then they're like even in a worse place.
Right. And to them, it almost in a way, it like confirms what they thought before, which is very hard because let me tell you something, ladies, all of you who are in this room, the power that you have to support a person who's struggling could make all the difference. Not that you're going to save their life, right? But the kindness that you can show them when they're struggling to say to them, like, I'm not scared of you and you're not a burden on me. Like, yes, healthy boundaries are great. We like healthy boundaries. And also like, for sure, I agree with you though, that like when one area of your life is teetering, it's going to affect everything else. Right.
I want to say something on the boundaries. So
yes.
I feel like people who are in that struggle, and sometimes it's hard for somebody to put boundaries because then they feel like, oh, so you don't love me.
Right.
Or you don't care about me enough to do that one more thing for me. But the other person, I've done so much, I need me time now. So
we're going to get there. Hold on to that because there's a very nuanced way to say to a person who's struggling, I love you and I want to support you and we need more help. We'll get there. Yes.
What if the person that is struggling thinks that he's dependent on my support?
That it's only you or no one else.
Just
right.
That needs it and it doesn't have my support.
Then nothing. Right. Hold on to that because we're going to come back. We are going to touch on that. I don't want to address it now because I want to go through some more details, but we're going to get there. The thing that I want to clarify though, is it's not always things that you're going to see directly. Not always are people going to be, signs can be very vague. So I'm going to let you all read this comic to yourself for a moment.
Someone read it out loud.
Okay, this boy goes up to his mom and kind of leans on her. And when she says, Jeremy, is there something you want to talk to me about? He goes, well, if you're going to pry it out of me like that. So notice he didn't outright ask for help. He didn't say, Mom, I'm struggling. I had a hard day. Can you talk? But his body language speaks for him. He's clearly not happy about something. But even when she says, hey, is there something going on? He's like, well, since you're asking, since you're prying it out of me, I'll tell you. Most people who are struggling, even if it's not with suicide, will be resistant to saying outright, yes, this is what's happening, right? Why? Because being seen is a very vulnerable thing. And you want to make sure that the person who's seeing you is someone who can actually hold space for you, right? So you're kind of going to dance around it to make sure, like, is this person a safe person for me to talk about? If I say this, will this go well, right?
The girl you spoke to that said she was afraid to do well.
Yeah. Invitations that you notice. Okay. The reason why I call these invitations and not warning signs is because people's behaviors are usually a way of inviting us in to pay attention. I'm doing something because I want you to notice. So things like disconnecting from family or friends, not caring about things they used to care about, giving away belongings, big shift in temperament or mood. So like suddenly becoming very low, suddenly becoming very happy, talking about death or dying, even as a joke, posting alarming things on social media, abusing alcohol or drugs, which, as we said, not everyone who's struggling with an alcohol or substance use problem is suicidal, but they might be. And suicide attempts also. Now, we talked about this, but we're not going to go into this right now. Just the idea that you have to keep in mind the whole person, right? What's happening in their life? What are their social connections like? Who's there for them, right? Sometimes these are not things you're going to have the answers to, but it's important to keep in mind that like under the cry for help is a person with many parts, right? But how do you actually know if they're having thoughts of suicide and they're not just having a bad week or month or going through a low period?
Just ask them.
You have to ask them. You have to ask. And here's the thing that throws a lot of people off. They're like, wait a second. You want me to ask directly if a person is having thoughts of suicide? That is really scary. And what if I plant the idea in their head? And what if they never want to talk to me again after this? Okay, so let me just clarify some things. One, I've been doing this for 7 years. I have taken part in over 300 crisis interventions. I have asked this question hundreds of times, and it is scary every single time I ask. And the reason I'm telling you that is not because I'm trying to scare you away from asking, but to remind you that even as a professional, it can be very overwhelming, because on the other side of that question is a human being in a lot of pain, right? And sometimes, actually a lot of times, when I ask that question, I am davening that the answer is no. I hope that the answer is no, and that I'm seeing things that are maybe related to something else, but not to this, right? So that's first. It doesn't necessarily get easier, and it shouldn't. If it gets easier, it gets easy for you to ask this question, like that's not a good thing. It should feel scary, right? The second thing is, it is physically impossible to plant the idea of suicide in someone's head by asking them this question in this way. Being direct and empathetic and kind does not plant ideas. Where does this myth come from, though? If we glorify suicide, if we make it, God forbid, something to look up to, if we make it something that we kind of make them feel like, oh, this is something you should feel like doing, that's going to plant the idea in their head. Okay? There was a third thing I said that I can't remember now.
I have a question.
Yes.
I feel like this is very human for somebody to ask and write to somebody in pain, and they could just say no.
Right.
And they really are.
We'll get there. Hold on for 1 second. Hold on for 1 second, because I know where you're going, and we're gonna get there. Okay. Asking the question. Okay. First of all, it depends on why you're asking. Did someone tell you that they saw something about this person? Are you seeing signs from this person? What, like, it depends on what the relationship is also. Are they your student? Are they your spouse? Are they your employee? Are they ABC? Who are they? And what's your relationship to them? And why are you asking them? The second thing is soften the buildup. You wouldn't start a conversation with, hey, how are you? Are you having thoughts of killing yourself? Why not? But also like left field. You have no reason to ask, right? So soften the, you need to build trust. You need to build trust. So like soften it. I always tell people, if you are walking into a conversation with someone where you feel like you're probably going to ask them this, like if there's someone in your life that you're concerned about and you're calling them on the phone or getting together with them on a park bench and you're like, I'm probably going to ask them this question today. Take like 5 minutes before you meet with them just to like breathe and kind of like give yourself some love, because you don't know what's going to be on the other side of this, of asking the question, right? You need to be prepared for that. The third thing is bring your evidence. Tell them why you're asking. These are the things I'm noticing, and this is why I feel inclined to ask. I'm asking because I notice this thing is happening in your life. You're talking about this. You're making these comments. You're behaving in this way. And this makes me feel inclined to ask you, right? And also create a safe environment. If you're in Empire Kosher and you run into someone that you know is struggling and you're like, now's the time to act. No, it's not.
The milkshake aisle.
Yeah, right? Like, go like hang out with them next to the cheese and be like, hey, are you thinking about killing yourself? And their next door neighbor standing in the aisle next to them. No, right? Hey, can we go, when you're done shopping, can we go for a walk for 5 minutes? I want to talk to you. I need to ask you something. Or like, hey, is there a good time I can call you tonight? Or like, when is a good time that we can hang out, right? In the next, whatever, 24 hours, whenever it is, right? Okay, being direct and clear is really important. This does not mean that the person is going 110% going to be truthful with you. But the more direct you are, the clearer you are about your intentions. Now, clear and direct does not mean judgmental. Clear and direct does not mean, oh, you're not thinking about killing yourself, are you? Right? That puts the answer in the question for them. Direct and clear is, are you considering suicide? Have you had thoughts or plan to kill yourself? Now, some people do not feel comfortable using the word suicide. You can still be direct, right? Let me tell you what I know, or let me tell you what I'm seeing that is making me think this, right? Now, to answer your question, they might say no, but no is still a door opener. We don't take no at face value because there could still be something on the other side of that no, right? Do you know how many times I've done this where I will say to someone, I recently had this happen where I was on the phone with someone who I'm very close to who was going through a very hard time. And she goes, Leigh, before you ask me, I'm not thinking about suicide. She like beat me to the question. But she was like, but I understand why you might think that I am because of all of these things. They could also say no, but still mean yes, and not feel comfortable telling you. In that case, though, you can leave the door open in the line of, I'm really glad to know that it's not related to suicide. Do you want to tell me about, do you feel comfortable telling me about what else is going on? Or if you don't feel comfortable, if you don't want to talk, I just want you to know I'm here for you. If you cannot hold them hostage until you get the answer you want from them, right? You have to trust that you're going to do the best you can and you're going to plant the seed. There have been so many times over the years where someone will say to me, no, I'm not thinking about suicide, but thanks for asking. And I'll keep the conversation going and I'll get it to a good, smooth point. And then 2 days later, they'll call me and they'll be like, I actually didn't tell you the truth. And I was really scared in the moment to tell you because I was really worried about how you were going to react. Even though I know I can trust you, and even though I know you're a safe person, this is a really hard thing for me to admit, right? They also might say, yes, but I would never go through with it. Yes, but it's none of your business. Yes, but leave me alone. I don't want to talk about it. Even then, still a door opener. Thank you for telling me. I appreciate your honesty. How can I support you in this? Right? Okay. What if they do say yes, though? The first thing to know is that disclosure is a good thing. If they're disclosing to you that they're having thoughts of suicide, it means that they trust you. It's a very positive thing. Thank them for that. Stay calm to the best of your ability. This is challenging, but anyone ever try to calm down a toddler when they're mid tantrum? What happens when you try to calm down a toddler mid tantrum? They go more crazy. If you are with someone who is struggling and you panic, it's going to make them panic. So what I like to do is if someone discloses to me that they're suicidal, I go, wow, thank you for telling me. And I verbalize, I say, I'm going to take a deep breath now. Nothing wrong with that. What's scarier for them is you go, oh my God, are you really? Okay, we have to call 911. You're going to scare them out of wanting to talk to you, right? And it's with the best intentions, but again, regulate yourself so you can help them regulate, right? Because what happens when we panic? We flip our lid and we go offline. And if you're offline with someone else who's offline, you have two offline people, not going to work, right? Stay present with them. So like, do not pick up your phone and start texting people right now. Whoever is texting you can wait. Stay engaged. Keep them engaged in the conversation and listen to them. We're going to move into this right now. Listening to them is crucial. Even if it's only for 5 minutes, you want them to know that you are someone that they can share what they're going to. And by the way, so people ask me all the time, like, What's the limit? Do I now have to listen to them for 6 hours? Like, how do I know? Create a boundary. I'm really grateful that you told me. Thank you for trusting me with this. Let's talk about this. And I can give you 20 minutes of my time right now. And then let's figure out what we can do. Sometimes people will call me and I know that I'm not gonna, if I know that I don't have the availability to hold space for them for even 5 minutes, I will tell them, I'm really grateful that you called and I'm really grateful that you're seeking support. I'm sorry you're going through this. I don't have the capacity to hold space for you right now. I'm going to refer you to somebody else who can. You're still listening. You're not shutting the door in their face, but you're making them aware that you're not available right now.
And that goes back to that point, if the person is dependent on you.
So if the person is dependent on you, it's not a matter of trying to convince them that they should get support from someone else so much as it's like, I understand that you feel safe with me, and I'm grateful you feel safe with me. And we also have to explore other ways to keep you safe. I always tell people when they push back on me, they're like, you're the only person I want to talk to about this. I said, okay, I understand where you're coming from, but it's not safe for you or for me if I'm the only one who's supporting you. Because that one time you can't be there for them, the one time you don't pick up the phone, the one time you can't be there with them for hours, it's not realistic for one person to hold their hand forever. It doesn't mean that you're dumping them and dropping them and be like, I'm done with you, goodbye, right? But just saying to them, I understand you, I recognize why, and I'm so happy to be there and support you, and it's not safe if I'm the only person, right? Okay, I want to read you this quote, and then we're going to dive into that last piece. The human soul does not want to be advised or fixed or saved. It simply wants to be witnessed, to be seen, heard, and companioned exactly as it is. When we make that kind of deep bow to the soul of a suffering person, our respect reinforces the soul's healing resources, the only resources that can help the sufferer make it through. We cannot give them anything that they don't already have in themselves. Sometimes they don't know that they have those tools within themselves, right? What's the job of a therapist? To fix your problems for you? What? To listen. And do what by listening? And by validating doing what?
Help yourself find solutions.
Deanie and I had dinner together, and I was telling her that when I first started seeing my therapist, I was really mad at her because I wouldn't understand why she wasn't giving me things to do. And every time I would tell her, like, Carly, give me homework at the end of a session, she's like, you know what to do. We just spent an hour talking about what you can do. Go practice those things that exist inside of you. Breathing, journaling, walking, screaming into a pillow. Try every single one of those things at least one time a week. See you next week. And I used to be like, tell me what to do. Not her job, right? Okay. Active listening is your secret superpower. This is true even if a person is not in crisis. How often do we get into a conversation with someone and we're not actually listening to them? We're filtering what they're saying through our perspective and coming up with an answer while they're talking to us, right? I'm hearing you, I'm hearing, but I'm not really hearing because in my head, I'm also making my grocery list. And I'm thinking about how I have to call my doctor back. And I'm thinking about how I don't agree with you on that point. So I'm going to hold on to that point and not hear anything else you say so that I could argue with you on that point in 5 minutes when you're done talking, right? This is the normal human experience. So let me tell you something, ladies. Do not wait until someone is in crisis to practice active listening. Active listening is a skill that we should all have at all times, right? And active listening doesn't mean you have to drop down face to face with a person now and like be in it with them for hours, right? But sometimes when my husband will tell me something, I don't even hear the end of the conversation the end of the sentence before I interrupt him and tell him my opinion. Is he waiting? Is he looking for my opinion? Not necessarily, but if I hadn't interrupted him, I would have heard what he wanted, right? The crucial step, okay? What active listening does is it creates a sense of safety and trust. It also increases sense of ambivalence and increases awareness and increases ambivalence about not wanting to die. So I just want to go back to the slide for one moment.
Yeah, I don't understand that one.
Ambivalence about wanting to die. Okay, so let me explain what I mean by that. Remember this idea I was saying about when a person is in distress, it's like they have binoculars glued to their face. Okay, so People can hold two truths at the same time. Ambivalence is holding two truths. So I'm struggling and I'm in crisis and I think I want to die, but I don't actually really want to. I'm looking for a way to pay for that's ambivalence. Ambivalence is, it's not that I want my life to end, it's that I cannot keep living my life like this. So what listening does, and when I say listening, I also mean like on a body level, maybe breathing with them, holding their hand, hugging them if they want. It's not just about verbalizing, it's also about helping them like get into their body. And by the way, this is not something that we're doing with the check mark guarantee that they're going to walk away from this conversation and never struggle again. This is about helping them feel safe enough to get to the next step so that they're making a different choice. I'm choosing to take the binoculars away from my eyes for right now, right? So if crisis is, I only see things from this perspective and nothing can change my mind, ambivalence is, oh, wait a second. There's a bigger picture here and I can see the bigger picture for long enough to want to get support. Okay, so things to try, especially with people in crisis, thank them for sharing. Just because you ask them doesn't mean they're going to be truthful. And just because they're truthful doesn't mean they're going to want to talk about it. But you could do a lot. You could go a long way by saying, thank you for telling me. I'm so grateful that you trust me with this. Asking thoughtful questions, and I'll give you examples of that in just a minute. Be patient, right? Like I was saying before, if a person is mid-panic attack, being like, okay, what are we going to do to help keep you safe, right? Validate their feelings. I'm sorry you're going through this. This is really heavy. Do you want to tell me more about this, right? Grounding with them, with their permission, taking a few breaths, holding their hand, giving them a hug, helping their body get back online. Things to avoid. This does not mean that we will never do these things because we are human beings and we all make mistakes, but just the awareness gives us better tools to not do these things. Yelling or panicking, interrupting, accusing, telling them to get over it, belittling them, offering quick solutions or band-aids, disengaging or tuning out. And if you feel like you're doing any of those things, or for whatever reason you feel that you're avoiding a conversation because you just don't feel like the right fit, it's okay to tell them, I don't know that I'm the right person for this, but let's find someone who can be. Okay? I'm going to give you some examples of questions that disengaging or tuning out. Picking up, Michal, can we? How are you, Michal?
Really struggles with.
You know what? One second. I'm so sorry. I'm getting an email. Right? No one wants to be on the receiving end of that. Right? That's disengaging or tuning out. So you have like years and years of experience of listening to each other.
Yes.
Oh my God, all those hours that we were supposed to be working where we were really talking. We were changing the world.
Yeah.
That's right. Okay. Ways to drop in and ask thoughtful questions. Okay. So do you feel comfortable telling me more about what's happening? What kind of support are you looking for? I understand this is difficult. Take all the time you need. The last one is the most important one for me. Okay. I want to support you, but I must admit, I don't think I'm equipped to. I can be here to listen, but is there additional support we can seek together to keep you safe? Why together? You don't want to be like, sorry, you're going through this. That's really awful. Go find somebody else. Right? They're going to be like heartbroken. I just did all this effort to go find you. And now you're telling me I'm not the right person. Adios. You just shut them down. Right? But I tell people all the time. I mean, I'll give you an example. Baruch Hashem, I'm expecting. And a couple of weeks ago, I had nothing major, but I ended up in the emergency room. Okay. And as I'm on my way to the emergency room, my phone does not stop ringing. It's the same number calling me 3, 4, 5 times. And I'm like, okay, this is definitely a crisis situation. I did not pick up the phone because I was driving to the emergency room. When I got to the emergency room, I parked my car. I took a deep breath. I texted the number. I said, hi, I'm assuming that you're reaching out for crisis. Oh, this is what it was. The person left me a message at one point, like one of the few times that the phone rang, they actually left me a voicemail. So I listened to the voicemail and then I responded with a text. I said, I'm so sorry that this is what you're going through right now. I'm more than happy to support you, but to be perfectly honest, I'm not in a position right now where I can. Here are 3 numbers that you can call. Hatzlacha Rabba, and like, if when I'm available later on today or tomorrow, if the rain,
We all had a freak out.
if there's something I can, if I can be available later and if the need is still there, then I'll be there. I once had a woman reach out to me, Arab Shabbos, and my daughter had like the worst ear infection and it was just not the right time. And so I did that with her. I gave her and to be perfectly honest with you all, she was really frustrated. She's like, but I'm calling because I need to speak to you. And I was like, I know. Infant with an ear infection. I'm sorry, right? I gave her the numbers. A few weeks later, this was someone in my community. So a few weeks later, I ran into her in Walmart. And when I saw her from across the aisle, I was like, oh no, I'm really nervous that she's going to be really mad at me because I didn't take her call. She came up to me. She gave me a huge hug.
Wow.
She was like, I called one of the resources. They connected me with a social worker and my child was able to be seen same day. I would not have been able to connect her with that social worker. Definitely not while my daughter was like screaming her ear off, Okay. I just want to give you an example and the difference between.
Can I ask?
Yes.
So sorry. What
Question.
are those 3 numbers?
Hold on.
Yeah. What are those?
I can't hear you so well. Go ahead.
Can you hear now?
I think so.
Okay. What are those 3 numbers that you give? Is it like hotlines or?
So we're going to get there in just a second. Thanks. The question is, what are the 3 numbers that I give?
No secrets.
No, no way. There's no secrets when it comes to mental health resources. I'm going to provide those numbers in just a moment.
Okay.
And I will send them to Michal. And also I'll tell you now, spoiler alert, I have swag for you all. But if you scan the QR code that goes to our website, thelongshortroad.com, I'll give you these. These are resources for you. These are not for people in crisis. This is for your own mental health support. If you scan the QR code and it goes to our website, we have a list of resources by city, by county, by need. So it's not just calling the 988 hotline, because while that number can be helpful sometimes, I will be honest with you all, there have been times that I've called the suicide prevention hotline and they've put me on hold for 20 minutes.
Oh boy.
And you do not want that.
Oh boy.
You really don't want that. So I always recommend go local and go as local as physically possible. But when you're with someone, you're probably not thinking about, let me Google and find out what's the right number. So we did that homework for you, so you don't have to. You could go to our website, click on resources, and then there's like a very extensive list that we update on a pretty regular basis. Yes.
Out of the country.
We also have resources for out of the country. And you can WhatsApp most of those numbers. In fact,
I'm saying let's say they need a social worker or whatever, like.
So a lot of the a lot of the referral services, so like hotlines or warm lines, if you call within, like, for example, if you call the hotline in Israel and you tell them, I'm calling because someone in my life is looking for ABC, they can usually refer you to someone. 9 times out of 10, they can refer you. And if not, they'll give you another number that can.
Most of the people would accept to be a social worker.
Not always.
Right. So what do you do?
We'll get there. We'll get there. 1 minute.
Is the texting line also 20-minute wait?
No, but not always do people find that to be helpful. Okay, so here's where we're going to go with this, and then we're going to wrap up because it's getting late and I don't want to keep you all over. Officially, I have 10 more minutes, but I want to let you all go. I'm monitoring the time on my screen. I'm like, we have 90 minutes. Okay, we have 5 more minutes. Okay. How do I get more help involved? Validate, appreciate, refer. Validate. I'm so sorry you're going through this. Appreciate. I'm so grateful that you told me. Refer. Let's figure out together who we can go to. Okay. So how do we do this? 1, figure out who's already in their safety network. If a person is coming to you, if it's a student, if it's a friend, if it's a community member, if it's an employee, employer, whoever, who is in their safety network right now? It's a fair question to ask. Who else knows about this? Who else is aware of the struggles you are going through? They might say, no one, you're the first person I'm telling. Okay, well, at least you've like highlighted where you're at, right? The second thing is if when you're including new characters, so to speak, in their network, it's not your job to take the direction away from them. Meaning, will there be times you need to call 911? Yes. Calling 911. What? So here's the thing. There have been times, unfortunately, I will be honest with you, my least favorite thing to do is to call Hatzalah or 911. I always dread those phone calls, and I always know there's going to be a time where it's not in my hands and a person needs to go to the hospital. When that happens, I talk to them. Hey, person, based on what's happening, the next best step to keep you safe is we need to call Hatzalah. I'm going to stay right here with you. Usually I'm on the phone with them. I'm going to stay with you on the phone until they come, and I'm going to be with you so that I can explain to them what's happening.
They're not like they're gonna hang up.
Have there been times where a person's hung up on me? Absolutely. I'm so mad at you. I can't believe you did this to me. I never want to speak to you again. Click.
And you still have that.
Absolutely.
You get their
And it helps.
It might. Look, here's
other address they give it to you.
Sometimes yes, but I'll be honest with you. Within Crown Heights, when I tell Hatzalah the last name, they know where to go. I'm not kidding. I'm serious. Like, here's the thing about hospitalization. Okay, it is a Band-Aid. It's not a long-term solution. If the alternative is, God forbid, they're going to attempt suicide, you put them in a place that's going to keep them safe. But a psychiatric hospital is not a long-term solution for anyone. A person's going to come out of a hospital and they're still going to have to do the work. Look up, I usually show this video, but we don't have time for this. A guy named Kevin Hines, Hines. He survived a suicide attempt by jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. And after that suicide attempt, he was hospitalized 6 times. And he's very honest about it. He was like, everybody thinks that I got out of the hospital after my first suicide attempt and I was all better. No, I wasn't. It took a lot of work he's alive and thriving. He's a brain health advocate. He's a suicide prevention advocate. He's one of the most impactful public speakers I've ever heard. The guy struggled. And I think it's important to recognize that it's like Hines.
What's his first name?
Kevin. There's an 8-minute version of his story.
I was gonna say, I called it 25 minutes.
No, there's an 8-minute version.
Okay.
I think it's called Man Who, here I can even
I think
find
I heard it. That's
Man Who, it's this one. It's this one. Power 106 Los Angeles. It's 8 minutes and 59 seconds. Man who jumped from the Golden Gate Bridge.
Awesome.
Shares his story. A hospital is a Band-Aid. Sometimes it's a very necessary Band-Aid, but it's not going to fix everything. You know? But if it's the difference between life or death, you go there. Is it not every single time I have had someone hospitalized, it is, I don't sleep that night because I'm just so sad that I had to do that. I'm sad that I had to get to that point, but I also know that God forbid the alternative could be something else. So you got to weigh your risks, you know? Okay. Making connections with a third person.
How do you balance that?
For myself?
A little bit jumping steps, but yeah.
How do I balance that? First of all, I have a very good support network. I have a very supportive spouse. Thank God. I would not be able to do this work without him. Seriously. What? Thank you. No, he's in finance. He has no shaykhus to mental health work at all. None. I think that might actually make it better though, because I think if he was a mental health professional, he'd just be like, la 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 la, we're off hours. I don't want to hear it. And I also know myself well enough after years and years and years of doing this to know sometimes, look, most of the times that I get crisis calls, it does not lead to hospitalization. But even a crisis call, when I get a phone call from a father who says my son is was in a psychiatric hospital, he just tried to kill himself 3 days ago, that's very heavy. Usually what I do, I'll turn my phone off for 20 minutes after a call. My voicemail is, if you cannot reach me and you're calling for an emergency, hang up and call 911. So I have that buffer. I turn my phone off. I put on whatever music I think is going to be helpful in that moment. And I either move my body or take a really cold shower. Or I journal. I'm a writer. first and foremost. That's my first love. So I write for 15 minutes or I go for a run. Sometimes I'm just standing in the shower going, because it's really hard. And sometimes I don't know if I said the right thing, right? But like, sometimes I make an emergency appointment with my therapist and be like, I just had this really hard thing happen and I cannot wait until next week. I need to talk. And if she's not available, I go to somebody else. Like I've had to create a network of safety for myself so that I can do my job. But that's the point. If I don't have a safety network, I cannot do my job, period. I'm only as effective as my health is, which is why also when I'm in the emergency room or when my daughter has an ear infection, I refer to somebody else. Right? So
You feel like it gets easier also with yours?
no, really not. Really not. And I'll tell you why. I think I'm more
You're
equipped.
regulating yourself.
Oh no, I'm regulating myself. That's definitely gotten easier. In the beginning, it was like,
The last, like,
oh my gosh, I used to be in the beginning when these phone calls would come in. I think I would be
20 minutes is pretty good.
out of 2 hours. Sometimes I pick up my daughter from preschool at 3:00. Sometimes I pick her up as soon as I know she's in the car and I don't have to communicate with her more anymore. My phone is off for the rest of the day from 3 p.m. until the next morning, if that's what I need. Sometimes it is only 20 minutes. Sometimes it's 6 hours, right? Especially with the heavier cases, because I am involved continuously in cases that are like, okay, we got to the hospital. Now what? All right, we're going to outpatient. Now what? We're going here. Now what? Right? But I always make sure that they have someone else in case they can't reach me, because I've been that person. And the reason why I'm saying it's not safe for you and it's not safe for them, I've been on that end where I'm like, nope, I'm going to be the only person. I'm going to be the only person for this person. No problem. And then I end up sick or someone in my family struggling, or I just can't handle it and I'm burnt out. And then what? They have no one else to go to. It's not fair to them. I did them a disservice by making myself 110% available. Does that make sense? Like, we're not doing anyone any favors by pretending we can be superheroes. We're not. We're people. So human to human. I cannot take this on right now. I'm sorry. Let me pass you on to somebody who can help.
yes.
When you've like said to in circumstances where you have to say you're going to call Hatsala, people like threatened you, like, don't you dare call or I'm gonna like,
Absolutely. Absolutely. I understand why you're so upset. I understand why this is so hard for you. I understand how scary this is. Your life is too important to me to take the risk that I'm not going to do anything and that, God forbid, tomorrow morning I'm going to hear that you attempted suicide or that you died.
So what do you do if you're like not in there with them in person?
So if they stay on the phone with you, you stay on the phone with them until you make that next connection. Like, I've had someone call me and they were like in their office and I was like, okay, can you walk to like human resources, or like, you're in school, can you go down to the guidance counselor's office? I'll stay with you on the phone, or like text me when you're in the guidance counselor's office. I've been on the subway and like noticed that someone was really not doing well. I am not getting into it with a stranger on the subway, but I give them the card and I'd be like, you look like you're going through something. I hope this could be helpful.
Is there ever time that you call numbers back after they even work?
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. But I also have to know, like, if they're not, last summer I called Asala and the woman who she had already like attempted when she called me. And then I knew her family members were upstairs on another floor of the house and had no idea. But I happened to be that I was in communication with the family the whole time. So I knew the phone numbers. I called Hatala first. And then I called the family and I said, I just want to let you know, this is what's happening. I'm sorry that I didn't tell you before, but there's an emergency. Like, it's an emergency. So she's not picking up the phone to me. I need you to go downstairs. But I did call Hatala and they're on their way. And they were very grateful because it saved her life.
How do you know when you have the phone?
I'm going to get there in 1 second. Let's go there now. If there is an imminent plan to harm themselves or others, meaning they tell you, I have a plan and I know when I'm going to go through with it. I know how I'm going to do it and I know when.
Why would they tell you?
How do you know? That
Because they don't, because more often they're looking for someone to tell them not. Not always are they, not always. Not always.
Not always.
Are they going to tell you that they have a plan? That's best case
Also, you
scenario.
feel about that because it's not like
Sure, but that's best case scenario, right? Not always is life function in best case scenario. I wish it did. We wouldn't be here having these conversations if it did, right?
Well, it's not like you said before, if they tell you, then at least you know.
Right.
For the next step, as you said before.
Right. If a person
That's why
is
you're asking the question.
right, exactly. But if they're also threatening to harm themselves or others, if you call Hatzalah on me, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. It's probably the right. And here's the thing, especially about Hatzalah Crown Heights, which a lot of people don't know. If you call them and ask them not to come in an ambulance because you don't want to freak everybody out, they will send a black car. Like Menachem Freeman will go personally in his personal vehicle. I have done this many times. No,
I've had to do that.
I've done this many times where he will go and assess the situation and only call an ambulance once he's there. And the interesting thing about a lot of the local hotlines, not 988, but local hotlines, which I'm going to put up resources now,
local,
like New York,
or just
NYC crisis line. If you call the NYC crisis line, they will send you, thank you. They will send you, they will send someone to your location. If you call the hotline and say, I am with this person in this place, or I know that this is where this person is, they will send someone to you.
I have a question.
Yes.
Before you said, if they have a plan of you know when a threat's a threat. Sometimes people
honestly, it's better to take it seriously, but that's also why, look, the thing I have learned is that it's better to take it seriously when the threat comes in than to be like, oh, they're just trying to manipulate me. They're just trying to get a rise out of me. They're trying to whatever. Take it seriously. Not always when a person gets to the emergency room will they be admitted. And unfortunately, if I'm being very frank with you, sometimes it takes an admission to the hospital for the person to realize like, oh, okay, this is being taken seriously. And like, if I really want help, then I have to do ABC. Sometimes there is nothing you can do for the person.
Right. What about like with children or teenagers who maybe will threaten or say things that will harm other people, and they're maybe being illogical, or maybe they are feeling truly like that.
Right. Where's the line?
Right.
I say always take it seriously. Look, here's the thing, especially with teens. Sometimes it will be like I'm doing this because I'm trying to get attention. But if that's what they're doing to get attention, then you have to ask why. Right? And like, if that is a need for attention, then we're going to follow that and be like, okay, I see that you're saying this. I'm nervous about this. We need to do something. Right? But that's also why it's better to call a hotline first than it is to call 911. Or if they have a mental health professional that they're already seeing, speak to that professional. And if the teen is under 18, get the parents involved first. Unless absolutely necessary to do something right now.
They can blame anything on you.
I'm calling because this person disclosed to me that they're having thoughts of suicide. And we decided together that the best course of action would be to get you involved. And so I'm letting you know.
And when do you get someone involved?
Consent? If they're like behaving irrationally or making, again, threats, claims. Look, this young woman who I called Hatzalah on a few months ago, the reason that I felt inclined to call Hatzalah is because she sent me a picture from a location where she was thinking about killing herself. And that location was blocked, meaning there were safety rails where she went. She went to the Brooklyn Bridge. You cannot jump off the Brooklyn Bridge. But she got there and took a selfie and sent me the words, well, I guess I have to go look for somewhere else to do it. And immediately I forwarded it to Hatzalah. I'm like, you need to go find her because she's going to go look for another place to do it. It's heavy stuff, guys. I told
We're
you.
gonna skip this line.
Okay. Here's let's talk about that. Okay. We're skipping safety planning because it's like 10:05 already and I want to let you guys go. Here's the thing. Okay.
We're good.
You probably.
No, well, I have a 2.5 hour drive home, but it's okay. It's okay. This is how I ground down. I have those 2 hours. Do you know the hardest thing for me over COVID was that my classes would end on Zoom and then I would be in my house and be like, it's 10 p.m. I have nowhere to go to like regulate. I would just get in my baby would be sleeping. I tell my husband I'm going for a drive and just like, I'm going to be blasting music the next 2 hours. That's how I do this. Find one thing that you can do tonight before you go to sleep, but really do it. Not like I'm going to take a shower and I'm going to think about everything while I'm taking a shower. Be present in the shower. What is the water, the temperature of the water? How does it feel on my body? Is there a specific body part I'm noticing, right? Is it too hot? Is it too cold? How does it feel when I step down on the floor when I get out? Do I have a plush carpet underneath? Do I have this? What are the sensations in my body, right? So actually, I'm going to give you all these now. I have emotional regulation toolkits for all of you. You can take one and pass. And on the back are just 5 suggestions for things that you can do to help yourself feel safe. They're very easy, basic things that anyone can do with things that you probably already have in your house. The work that we do in supporting other people, a big portion of it happens in how we take care of ourselves. So like, listen to a shir, listen to a podcast, listen to your favorite song. Michal, I'm going to leave a few of these for you. I'm going to leave all of these for you. I have so many. Yeah, I have a lot. Michal, you can, if anyone wants extras, take extras. And if you want more than what you have, just let me know after and I will mail them to you. The best way to,
This is so cool for like staffing account. Such a like quick fix, not like long drushes.
because long drushes don't usually work for people when they're struggling.
When you actually give it out, I would totally give it.
Absolutely. Where you great. Here's my email address. Email me and I'll send them to you. I also have stickers, but I'm not going to hand them out. You guys can just come up and take one or take one of each. Take one. There's one that speaks to you. Here's the bottom line. Okay. Supporting someone is going to look different in every situation. Sometimes it's going to be more intense. Sometimes it's going to be less intense. Sometimes you'll be very involved. Sometimes you'll be semi-involved. The most important thing that you can do for someone when they are struggling is just help them be seen, because you cannot fix the problem for them. And I want to be very clear that suicidal behavior and suicidal ideation, to get to a point where a person is not struggling, takes work on their behalf that you cannot do for them. Yeah, these are all the, these are the stickers I have. Okay. I'm putting these out and you guys can take.
The person is inside a pit. He can't get out by himself.
No, he can't get out by himself, but he has to be willing to.
So his job is just to want to go.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wanting help is the first step. But this is why it's a long, short road. Right? This is why the name of our organization is what it is. It's not a simple process, right? And like, I have seen hope for people who did not think it was physically possible to ever be okay. I've also seen, look, I'll be honest with you. I view suicide the same way that I view cancer. You do everything for the person. You give them everything. They might not win the battle. And that's a hard reality of being human, right? You could give them everything. They still might not make it. But it's not because they're broken. It's not because there's something wrong with them or something wrong with you, right? We all go through battles in life. There are battles that we are able to win and there are battles we're not. But it's not about whether we can convince them to win the battle. It's how do we support and love them when they're still here, right? You don't give up on a cancer patient just because there's a chance they might die. You don't give up on a suicidal person because there's a chance they might not make it. Does that make sense? So like, if I can leave you with some hope, before we end this, it is possible to heal. It is possible to get better. The road is long, though. Our job on that road is not to do the work for them. It's not to convince them to get better. It's to hold their hand and say to them, I'm here for you. And we're going to find the right things together. And also, I'm also going to take care of myself on this journey, because I can only be there for you as much as I can be there for myself. Right? So let's all take a deep breath. You're welcome to take a few more if you want. I will. And just know that just by being here tonight, you're already making a difference in the world. Because the fact that you're taking this seriously, like, there's a lot we can do with just knowing that we can make a difference. But here's my contact information. If you have questions on what we covered tonight, or you want to talk about something in a more specific way, you're welcome to send me an email. You can visit our website. Our information is there too. Michal, thank you for hosting this. Thank you everyone for being here. I'm so grateful to you.
Thank you.
And we should never have to use these tools.
Amen.
Amen. Okay. Good night, everyone on Zoom.
Thank you.